The rain fell harder that Saturday morning. Not the kind of rain that washes things clean, but the kind that feels like a warning. Inside St. Mark's Church, candles flickered against white walls. Hundreds of guests filled the pews. And at the altar, Father Michael stood waiting, his hands trembling slightly as he held his Bible. The bride was walking down the aisle now, Sarah, in her grandmother's wedding dress, the white silk catching the golden light from the stained glass windows. She was smiling. But Father Michael's eyes weren't on her smile. They were on her hands, and what he saw in that moment would change everything. His hand froze mid-movement. The organist kept playing, but he raised his palm, a quiet stop. The music cut out. Everyone went silent. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice steady but heavy with something no one could name. "We need to pause." The groom's face went pale. Sarah's mother gasped, and in that second, 300 people realized they weren't watching a wedding anymore. They were watching a truth about to come undone. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. But right now, you need to hear this story. The question that raced through everyone's minds in those first terrible seconds was simple but terrifying. What did the priest see? Why would a man of God stop a wedding in front of everyone? What secret was hidden beneath that white dress, under that layer of silk and lace, in the heart of a bride who looked so certain just moments before? Was the groom hiding something? Was the bride lying? Or was someone else in that church harboring a truth so dangerous that it couldn't wait another moment to be revealed? The camera would later show that the priest's face wasn't angry. It wasn't accusatory. It was something worse. It was heartbroken, as if he'd just witnessed a lie so profound that even God himself was holding his breath in that sacred space. Sarah had grown up in this town. She was the kind of woman everyone loved, not because she was perfect, but because she tried so hard to be good. She worked as a nurse at the local hospital. She visited elderly people on weekends. She volunteered at the shelter. Her friends described her as loyal, kind, the kind of person who would drop everything if you needed her. 12 months ago, she met Marcus at a charity event downtown. He was a successful businessman from the city who'd moved back home to take over his father's construction company. He was charming, generous, and he seemed to complete her in all the ways she didn't know she was incomplete. Within 3 months, he proposed. Everyone celebrated. The town was thrilled. Sarah had finally found her person. They'd set a wedding date for this Saturday. The planning was perfect. The flowers were ordered from 2 states away. The caterer had prepared a menu that took 3 consultations to finalize. Every detail was exactly what Sarah had always dreamed of. Her mother bought a new dress. Her father practiced his speech. Her bridesmaids planned the bachelorette party. Everything was moving forward like an unstoppable train heading toward happiness. But 3 weeks before the wedding, something changed. Sarah started having panic attacks. At first, no one noticed. She'd go to the bathroom during work and just breathe for 5 minutes to compose herself. She'd wake up at 3 in the morning, her heart racing, her sheets soaked with sweat. Her best friend, Jennifer, finally asked her directly, "Are you having second thoughts about Marcus?" Sarah didn't answer. Instead, she cried. She cried for 20 minutes without saying a word. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "I got a call 3 days ago from someone I haven't heard from in 2 years, someone I thought I'd never hear from again." The person on the phone was David, Sarah's ex-fiancé from college, the one who'd ended their engagement suddenly, moved away, and disappeared from her life. Except he hadn't disappeared completely. He'd been in an accident 2 years ago, a terrible car crash. For 6 months he was in a coma. Sarah had visited him every single day while he was unconscious. She'd held his hand and whispered to him, telling him stories about her day, about her dreams, about how much she loved him. And then one day, his mother told Sarah it was time to let go, that the doctors didn't think he'd wake up, that it was better to move on. Sarah was devastated, but she did move on. She eventually met Marcus, and life seemed to be starting again. And then David called. "I woke up," he'd said. 3 months ago, I woke up in that hospital bed with no memory of 2 years passing, but I remembered you. I remembered your voice. I remembered everything." Sarah didn't know what to do. She'd been engaged to David once. She'd loved him with the kind of love that only happens when you're young and certain about forever. But that was 2 years ago. Or was it? Because David was alive. He was awake. And he was alone in that hospital, waiting for someone who'd promised to love him forever. But she'd also promised that to Marcus. She was trapped between 2 versions of loyalty, 2 versions of love, and no way to satisfy them both. Sarah confided in Father Michael the Thursday before the wedding. She came to the church alone, found him in the sanctuary, and sat in the front pew. She told him everything. She told him about David waking up. She told him about the guilt that was eating her alive. She told him that she'd promised David she would come see him, but she couldn't face him because seeing him would mean breaking her promise to Marcus. She told him that every time she thought about walking down the aisle on Saturday, she felt like she was lying in front of God. Father Michael listened without interrupting. When Sarah finished, she looked at him and said, "So I'm asking you as a priest, as someone who knows about forgiveness and redemption, do I have the right to marry Marcus when I know there's a man who's just woken from a coma who loved me with all his heart? How do I live with that?" The priest didn't answer immediately. He went home that night and prayed. He prayed until dawn, asking God what he was supposed to do. The seal of confession meant he couldn't tell anyone what Sarah had said, but the wedding was tomorrow, and Sarah was planning to make a vow before God while carrying a truth like that. That's when Father Michael realized something that chilled him. Sarah was planning to keep both secrets. She was going to marry Marcus anyway. She was going to keep the fact that David existed, that David was alive, that David was waiting for her, hidden forever. And Marcus would never know, neither would David. The only person who would know the full truth was Sarah herself, living with that buried knowledge for the rest of her life. The priest couldn't allow that, not in his church, not in front of God. When Sarah walked down the aisle that Saturday morning, Father Michael made his decision. He didn't break the seal of confession. He didn't tell anyone what Sarah had confided in him, but he asked her a question that only she would understand. He asked her if her heart was truly free to make this vow, and he waited for her answer. Sarah opened her mouth, and nothing came out. She tried again. Still nothing. And then she started crying. Not delicate tears, real, body-shaking sobs. She couldn't lie. Not in that moment. Not in front of God. The guests didn't know what was happening. Marcus looked confused. Her mother stood up, unsure whether to go to her daughter or stay seated, and then Sarah did something that shocked everyone. She took off her veil, she handed her bouquet to her best friend, and she told everyone the truth. She told them about David. She told them he'd woken up. She told them that she'd fallen in love with Marcus, that she did care about him, but that she couldn't be married to him while another man was sitting alone in a hospital room. A man who'd loved her through unconsciousness. A man who'd waited for her while she moved on. She told them that she didn't deserve to be anyone's wife right now. She deserved to be honest. Marcus left before she finished talking. He left through the side door, and outside, he got into his car and drove away. Sarah's father came and held her as she collapsed in the aisle, and the rain outside kept falling, harder and harder, as if the whole world was crying with her. Over the next week, the story spread through the town like fire. People had opinions. Some called Sarah brave, some called her foolish, some blamed the priest for interfering, others said he was a hero for preventing a lie from being sanctified. Marcus didn't speak publicly, but his family released a statement expressing their disappointment. The wedding was off. The gifts were returned. The carefully planned future was unmade in 300 seconds. But something else happened too. Sarah went to the hospital. She went to David's room. She sat on the edge of his bed, and she looked at the man she'd loved 3 years ago, the man who'd been asleep, the man who'd only just woken up to find that the world had changed, but his heart hadn't. "I'm not the same person you remember," she told him, "and I don't know if I can be the person you need me to be. But I owe you honesty. I owe you the chance to know that someone in this world never forgot about you. I came every single day while you were sleeping, and I'll be honest with you now, I don't have all the answers. But I'm here, and if you want to know me again, I'll let you try." David reached for her hand, and they sat in silence for a long time. Not the silence of people in love, but the silence of people who were choosing, together, to start over with the truth instead of lies. What Father Michael understood, and what took the town weeks to understand, was that he hadn't stopped a wedding to punish Sarah. He'd stopped it to save her. Not from Marcus, but from herself. Because the greatest lie we can tell isn't the lie we tell others. It's the lie we tell ourselves when we pretend that keeping secrets is the same as keeping love. Sarah had loved Marcus. That was real. But she loved in a way that required her to hide, to forget, to bury part of her own story. And that kind of love doesn't grow, it festers. Marriages aren't built on perfection, they're built on choice. And if that choice requires you to pretend that a crucial part of your life didn't happen, then it's not really a choice, it's an erasure. Within 2 months, Marcus was engaged to someone else, someone who didn't have a past that complicated their future. And that was his right. But Sarah took a different path. She spent time with David. She didn't marry him, but she helped him rebuild the life he'd lost. She was there when he relearned how to walk without assistance. She was there when he struggled with the memory gaps that would probably haunt him forever. They didn't become the great love story everyone had imagined. Instead, they became something quieter and more powerful. They became two people who chose truth over comfort, even when it cost them everything. A year after that wedding that never was, Sarah was sitting in the office of a therapist who specialized in trauma. The therapist asked her a question that changed how she understood the whole experience. "If Father Michael hadn't stopped the wedding, where do you think you'd be now?" Sarah didn't answer right away. She thought about what it would have felt like to wake up on her wedding night, knowing she was married to a man she cared about, but had betrayed before she even said her vows. She thought about what it would have felt like to run into David at the grocery store 5 years later and see in his eyes the moment he realized that she'd chosen convenience over courage. She thought about what it would have felt like to live with that knowledge, buried under years of routine, slowly poisoning everything from the inside out. "I'd be a different person," she finally said. "I'd be someone I don't want to meet." The therapist nodded. "And now?" Sarah smiled for the first time in weeks. "Now I'm a person who knows that love sometimes means breaking your own heart to keep someone else's intact, and that's a person I can live with." The townspeople's judgment eventually faded. Marcus went on to have a successful life with his new wife. David slowly reintegrated into society, eventually finding work and peace. Sarah never married, not because she didn't want to, but because she'd learned something fundamental about herself. Some people are meant to be the bridge in other people's stories, not the destination. And that's not a tragedy. That's a different kind of grace. So now we come to you. We come to the question that this story has been asking since the first moment. What would you have done? If you'd been a guest in that church, would you have applauded the priest for stopping the ceremony? Or would you have been angry at him for interfering in a moment that wasn't his to control? And more importantly, if you were Sarah, could you have made the same choice? Could you have faced your loved ones, your family, the judgment of 300 people, and admitted that you'd made a mistake? Could you have destroyed your own carefully planned future to protect someone else's right to know the truth about you? These questions matter because they're not just about weddings. They're about every moment in our lives when we have a choice between the comfortable lie and the difficult truth. How many of us are living comfortable lies right now? How many of us are wearing the white dress of a perfect life while carrying secrets that would change everything if they came to light? How many of us are walking toward an altar, metaphorically speaking, knowing deep down that we're not being honest about who we are and what we really want? And perhaps the hardest question of all, if someone stopped you right now, in front of everyone you love, and asked you if your life was really true, what would you say? This is what Father Michael understood. This is what Sarah learned. And this is what the town eventually came to accept. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do is break the promise you made to one person in order to keep a greater promise to yourself and to the truth. Comment below and tell us, where are you watching from? Have you ever had to choose between the comfort of a lie and the pain of honesty? Have you ever been on either side of a moment like Sarah's? We want to hear your stories. We want to know how this resonated with you, and if you're thinking about subscribing, this is the kind of story that will be here every single week. Stories about real people, real choices, and the sometimes heartbreaking beauty of choosing truth. Subscribe now, because you never know when you'll hear a story that changes how you see your own life. And thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring about stories that matter.